So this is coupled with we're going for a harmonized risk-based approach for the company, following a CSA model, and just the harmonization of different standards and procedures. A lot like a lot of companies, our company has grown through a lot of inorganic growth over time. We've acquired different companies, piece of it, and we're in a multi-year program to sort of harmonize that and inspire quality as one organization, one vision, one voice of the company. You go from like 126 different quality systems down to less than 20, 9 different policies and over 65 different procedures on how to validate software, down to 1 policy and 4 procedures. That's the basic gist of it, right? And in that, we look at reducing the amount of burden of that documentation requirements. The old standards across the board averaged about 19 different SDLC, or software development lifecycle deliverables, per system change, right? We now harmonized it, create all of the same standard, and we actually then categorize it based on the risk approach associated with it, talking about the impact of the system, whether in its complexity. And for a simple system, we went from 19 documents to 2. And from a medium system, we're at 4. And even for a larger scale system, we're down, reduced the number of documentation down to only 7 for a given system through deploying it. Now, that doesn't mean we got away with get rid of all the testing. What it meant is we focused on doing the stuff that's actually of impact and of import to the organization. An example of a simple system, the piece of it would be an Excel spreadsheet you're using for quality release of products, right? So first of all, you don't validate Excel, it's a utility. Then what you do is you actually look at the logic behind it and you write exactly how it works, how you tested it, what evidence you used, and then sign off on it. That's it from a simple system perspective. Large scale systems actually have more deliverable, obviously, from requirement specs and designs, another piece of it. But I think, and I'll pick up on one of the questions that popped up in the chat as well. Same concept for a cloud-based solution, right? You have a platform and you're going to leverage that vendor's documentation of all the things they built in. You obviously have to assess that vendor, verify that their internal quality is correct, they piece of it, and they manage their releases. And then you do the delta comparison for their releases. If you deploy a system if they make updates every year, you hold off from deployment, you verify that you've done their release notes, you verify the impact of the system of it, and then you see what is impact. If it doesn't impact any of your systems, you leverage their documentation. If it does, you do a regression test based on what you did, what it changed, what that impact is. That impact analysis is more important and better than redoing all the testing. So that's the approach we're taking. So what it basically focuses, again, is on looking at how complex is the change, how much effect does it have on either the business continuity or regulatory risk, or to how, and then most importantly, is patient safety and product quality. If it doesn't impact any of those 3, or it's low on all of them, we consider that negligible, which means we leverage the vendor documentation and we don't test it. If it's higher, we do a higher level of risk associated with it. As we've done that, and go ahead and you can switch the slide if you want to. As we've done that, we've seen a significant value opportunity here and actually doing smarter set of work versus less. Just from reducing the amount of documentation that we've looked at about a little over a 50% reduction in the overall documentation burden of all these systems. Not everything is a simple system, right? But even the large scale systems have left documentation, and we're focusing on the work on the more value added activities piece of it. Because we're investing the time to actually do a functional risk assessment of the requirements up front, we're also looking at around an average of about 40% reduction in the overall testing. Now, I want to be clear on something, if we could. Go ahead and pop the next example about. This doesn't mean we stop testing or we do less testing. What we do is we do smarter testing, more effective testing. So we're going to actually have, and we have seen in some of these tests that we have more errors found in testing, which is actually a good thing, right? But we'll talk about that more in a minute. So one of the examples that we have is, as I said, inorganic growth. We have mergers and acquisitions that occur. Companies grow by acquiring new companies. When you're acquiring a new company, you also acquire their assets, their capabilities, and their liabilities. If you have a set of new applications that come in, you have to assess them, identify what to do with them, and get them ready so that you can then stand up behind an audit if it comes in the future. That's a large burden for any company, and it was an onerous burden when you look at the old process of the sort of the legacy or archaic set of documentation required. So we reduced that piece of it, and just in one of the acquisitions alone, we were able to reduce about 3 man-years worth of just document review associated with the different systems associated. Okay, and that's a huge win for the organization, and frankly, it allows my team to actually get real work done versus going through administrative overhead all the time. Okay, next example.
Yeah. And I just got a comment because I absolutely love this example. because there's so much M&A going on, especially for the larger manufacturers. I mean, this is a great example of how CSA can provide value around the M&A. And anytime you can measure savings in man years, that's pretty good. So.
We also look at, it's not a one size fits all. They're tailored down to it, and basically we integrated a local requirement in with one of our ERP systems, and we reduced the effort by about a little over half associated with the amount of review, and we also reduced the overall projection of the testing is around a 40% reduction in testing. Again, it's testing on the high risk functions and the pieces there, and decreasing the amount of testing on the low risk components. I was mentioning in the piece of it that it actually increases the number of tests that were failed, because they're actually getting to the actual functional requirements. So it decreases the script errors based on the script being wrong and the documentation being done by around 60 to 70% on some of the examples we have, but it increases the errors we find that are real also by about 20%, which is a good thing, because if you test it first and you find it in testing, it's a heck of a lot better than finding it after the fact and you get critical change what's in production. Because people have time to focus on what the real world activity is and what the user acceptance is, versus did I fill out the 75 different steps correctly, or because a lot of script errors you find, especially when they're very prescriptive in the script, is the person said click on enter and the actual the value is next. The button was a piece of it. Those don't add any value. They actually slow the process down. They get people confused on what the document is, and this is where a lot of that testing and CSV burden and feeling of like pain comes from. Is they're stuck. Everybody was stuck in doing the. Are you serious? I have to write down what I put on 15 fields on a form, and it's the same 15 fields, and I have to do it like 14 script wise. You don't. If you look at the design correctly and write the testing appropriately, you can focus on what it really is, and then what the outcome is, not just did I click on the 53 fields on the screen at the same time. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah.
Next.
And I mean, just a quick comment on what you just went through. It was awesome, right? I mean, I remember, Frank, when 2016, 2017, when we were trying to message, right, the FDA industry CSA team on, why is CSA so important, right? I mean, you want to be careful, right? Because what we're trying to message is we're reducing the documentation burden, but in fact, we may be increasing the testing and the quality, right, of the testing. And
yeah, we always use that slide that showed, 80% testing or 80% documentation, 20% testing, flip the script, right? Make it 80% testing, 20% documentation, right?
And I think, Roy, the example you just gave, I mean, that is exactly what we were looking for, right? It's, I don't want to get tripped up with test script errors. What I want to find are real software issues, right? And that's what you just talked to, which was fantastic.
And I mean, these are just examples we've had a piece of it, and this is the ability to actually look at, you focus the testing based on the nature of the design. And these are just sort of the test cases we've used for our pilot projects as we go along. We're still going to evolve this. We have a lot more to learn as an organization. We're going to get better at it as we go, but that's the piece of it.